Nowhere is this sense of change revealed more dramatically than in architecture. In a drab suburb of Paris, at the Church of Saint-Denis, once the glorious burial place of the kings of France, we can pinpoint the moment of transition to the new visionary Gothic style.
It's very rare in the history of Western architecture when we can see a new style born in a new place, in one monument, at a very specific moment in time. But such is the case here, where, for the very first time, the Gothic style was created.
William Clark is an art historian who has made new contributions to our knowledge of Saint-Denis and Chartres.
The new style of architecture is characterized by these tall, thin columns, their foliage capitals that lift up the now even ceiling height, a network of pointed arches and rib vaults. These things had been used before, but what's new, indeed unique here at Saint-Denis, is the new sense of the organization of the space. The divisions are now played down in favor of an overall unified space that flows from one side of the building to the other. The differences from Romanesque architecture are clear. Romanesque architecture had massive, heavy, thick walls and divided spaces. Here at Saint-Denis, the divisions between units, like the walls between the radiating chapels, have simply disappeared in favor of this vast expanse of space that seems to float around us. And it's filled with light. The wall, as a surface, has disappeared and has been replaced by translucent screens of glass.
All this was due to the influence of one of the most extraordinary people in 12th century France, the man who conceived the new building, Abbot Suger of Saint-Denis. Suger believed that the light flooding the choir through the stained glass windows becomes divine light, a revelation of the Spirit of God. Thus it was possible, he said, to create in a church a strange region of the universe suspended between earth and heaven. Suger also placed gold and jeweled objects everywhere in his church, for these too were felt to reflect the divine light. In June 1144, Suger consecrated the new choir at Saint-Denis in the presence of the King of France, his nobles, and the chief archbishops and bishops. Dazzled by what they saw, they returned home inspired to equal or even outdo Suger's creation. Reims, Sens, Senlis, Soissons, Beauvais, Canterbury, and Chartres would soon show the influence of the new Saint-Denis. The medieval cathedral was the focus of popular pride and intense rivalry, for the prestige and importance of a town was determined to a large extent by the size and height and beauty of its cathedral. This rivalry pushed church spires to unprecedented heights. The spire of Chartres would extend beyond the top of a 30-story skyscraper. A 40-floor skyscraper would be needed to surpass the spire at Strasbourg. The dimensions of the cathedral at Amiens made it possible for the entire population of the city, some 10,000 people, to attend one ceremony. But it was in the height of the vaulting that the most intense competition reigned. When the vaulting of Notre Dame in Paris achieved a height of 108 feet, Chartres rose 121 feet above the ground. Reims then surpassed this with 125 feet. Next, Amiens rose 139 feet. Finally, Beauvais Cathedral, which would have beaten them all with a vault of 158 feet, went beyond the limits of safety and medieval engineering skill, and the walls of the choir collapsed. Despite isolated disasters like Beauvais, Gothic triumphed over much of Europe within a few generations. At Canterbury, when the choir was destroyed in the Great Fire of 1174, it was rebuilt in the new Gothic style. England was the first to adopt the Gothic.
Okay, I wanted you to see a lot of that video because, well, I think it's good. But besides that, it's important. And so I'm going to just focus very much on the architecture in this short lecture here. What we're really seeing is the move from Romanesque to Gothic. That's what art historians use those terms. So what happens from the move from Romanesque to Gothic? So the Gothic, as you saw, has rib vaults. The vaults are the top of the building. It looks like ribs, so that's why it's called rib vaults. I'll have pictures that show you this. And pointed arches at the top of the church. And those replace the barreled vaults of the Romanesque churches. So with the Romanesque churches look like a barrel vault at the top of the ceiling, the Gothic looks like a rib. And I'll show you the difference in pictures. You saw it in the video. The other thing Gothic had was something called a flying buttress, because the outside walls needed extra support because they were thinner walls. They were thinner walls and they had more stained glass, so they needed extra support. So you have these flying buttresses on the outside to support the building. So Gothic structures have these flying buttresses. The stained glass. Go to any of these great churches in many cities in Europe today and you'll still see beautiful stained glass. A lot of it's had to be replaced over time, but it's still beautiful. And stained glass was a mark of Gothic style, and we heard about that in the video too, right? The stained glass usually has biblical scenes, or also saints' lives, or sometimes kings commission stained glass and things like this. Okay, but it's a beautiful thing to look at. I think it's one of the great works of art in human history too. But also it really reflects the culture of the high medieval culture and religion. The building he was talking about that's considered the first Gothic building is the Abbey of Saint-Denis. Yeah, it looks like Saint Denis in English, but in French it's Saint-Denis. And Saint-Denis was an abbey, a monastery in what today would be northern Paris. And it was built by this man named Suger. Suger looks like Suger or Sucre or Sugar. And he was the abbot and a very significant man in the Kingdom of France at the time. He's very closely connected to the monarchy, and he designs this building, and it's generally considered the first great Gothic building with all those elements. And we saw pictures of it in the video there a second ago. So this style spreads as the commentator explained in the video there throughout. France first. Probably the most famous Gothic church, or the most well-known, is the church in Paris, Notre Dame. Many of the churches were actually called Notre Dame. It means Our Lady, and it's Our Lady is Mary, Madonna, or Frauen, Unsere Frau in German, or Our Lady in English. So they were all dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary, again showing you how significant she was in medieval saints, the devotion to medieval saints. And these are just some examples. These are some of the most famous ones. But as we saw, it spreads to England, Canterbury. That's the last one he mentioned in the video clip I showed you. But later to Germany, parts of Spain, northern Italy, etc. Okay, and it becomes the prominent style from the late 12th century, I would say, through the 15th century in many places. So if you look at this, you see, this is a Romanesque style. See, it looks like a barrel at the top. You see that? It's a barrel. It looks like you could put a barrel in there. That's a Romanesque style. These really thick columns. Here's the altar. In the Middle Ages, there were no seats. There wouldn't have been any seats. But notice how far away the congregation would be. This is the choir. So a choir, usually of monks, would have sat here or stood in here in the medieval period and sung and chanted. And the altar is back here, okay? This is a portal. This is the front of a church. And I'll tell you the dates there. It's pretty good. So they would have these scenes carved outside the church. This is actually a portal of the Last Judgment. So you have Christ sitting on the throne, heaven, and the apostles are on this side, and hell is on this side. The depictions of hell in the Middle Ages are great. So you have this creature swallowing people and excreting them into hell here. And I think that would probably be the devil or Satan or something like that. So you have heaven on this side, hell on this side. So this is an example of a Gothic, outward part of a Gothic church. So you see the flying buttress? That's a flying buttress. These structure here, and that holds the structure up to keep it from collapsing. See the arch, the very pointed arch going straight up? So this is the outside of a Gothic church there. This is Notre Dame. I took this picture, so it's not great. It's not a great photograph, just my phone. A couple years ago, 2017, I'm very fortunate to go see Notre Dame before very sadly this ceiling, much of it was burned, and a lot of the original wood that would have been from the 13th century burned. But this is what it looks like on the inside of Notre Dame. You can see here the rib vaults. See where it looks like ribs? That's why it's called a ribbed vault. Plenty of beautiful stained glass at the time. So there you go. There's Notre Dame, and this is the famous Notre Dame in Paris. Just some more stained glass here. This is a stained glass window from Canterbury, which is the famous cathedral in southern England. Okay, if you go to Canterbury, which is in southern England, and this is a window from that church. I've seen this window pretty up close, and it's not that big. It's not much bigger than the image you would look at on a computer like this. But it's probably a little bit bigger than you just look at on your computer. But if I was projecting it in class, it probably would be smaller than that, in fact. But notice how it demonstrates, here's Christ suffering on the cross, right? And Christ, there are 4 Old Testament scenes that point towards the crucifixion. So you have the Passover here. See the lamb's blood? You have Isaac and Abraham. The angel is holding Abraham's sword, and here's the ram in the thicket. And then you have over here, Moses strikes the rock with his rod and water comes out. And then here you have 2 spies coming out of the promised land, Canaan, with the grapes. So all these are supposed to be types or pointing towards the suffering of Christ. Another stained glass window. I just thought the colors were really pretty in this. Notice the green cross, the tree of the cross. Ooh, we better wait on that one. So that will be a very fun lecture later in the semester. So I'll wait on that one. I'll end with this image right here. So there you go. There is a very nice stained glass window.